All right, everyone, now it's time for separate election analysis because socialism got obliterated just as hard as the Dems in general. This is something, you're not going to hear this from Joy Reid, you're not going to hear it from Juan Williams and AOC. If they aren't maintaining radio silence right now, they're on an apology tour right now for leftoids and saying, well, Youngkin won because Terry McAuliffe didn't embrace enough progressivism. Yeah, his support of critical race theory obviously did wonders for his campaign. The reason it's close in New Jersey is not enough leftism. We need to do more for people. They expect universal pre-K and more taxes and on billionaires and all these things. The problem is that if you look at a couple of the more localized races, you can see quite the opposite is actually true. First, we turn to Seattle, where actually the incumbent Republican there, their city attorney, way out ahead. They called the race almost instantly because she had 59% on the initial ballot and was running against a Dem opponent who ran largely on a platform of decriminalizing all misdemeanors. Basically, some of that I support, by the way, on the drug war and certain things, but basically a tough on police as opposed to tough on crime approach. So that's number one, that's Seattle. Keep in mind, Seattle is a far-left city, one of the homes of Antifa, along with Portland and a few others in the United States. Obviously, people punishing, I think, the Democrats there on their soft-on-crime approach. And it's funny, because you have a message disconnect between the Biden, Pelosi, etc. types on one hand who are like, no, when we say defund the police, what we really need is more social workers and we just don't want to throw people in the clink for 10 years for smoking weed. By the way, I support largely that kind of police reform. We do have over-policing because we have a drug war. We also have a war on guns, but that's not something that Democrats are championing. That's what has happened there. Then you have the left that says, no, when we say defund the police, we mean defund the police. Everyone should do whatever they want. Antifa are actually really anti-fascists. That message appears to have fallen flat. Again, this is Seattle that we're talking about. You're not going to get this kind of margin of victory for the goddamn Republican, incumbent or not, in other circumstances. It's because the opponent was a leftoid. Then we've got Buffalo, where the four-time incumbent mayor of Buffalo was actually ousted as the Dem candidate in the primaries. Lost badly to India Walton. India Walton, of course, was poised to potentially become the first openly socialist mayor in the United States, the only one that there would be. Losing by, again, an incredible margin, 17 points at last count, against a write-in campaign against the same incumbent that the Justice Dem types had ousted in the primaries. This is the leftoids' main strategy. You go into an area that's safely blue. You don't have to worry about the Republicans really there. You go into that area, you pick off an incumbent who may not have had to really run a campaign for the most part for multiple cycles, and you get someone in there and you throw everything at them and try to oust them in the primaries. Now, that worked. The name is Byron Brown, actually, was the incumbent. They ousted him. He wasn't the Dem candidate. So he says, oh, fuck you. I'll do a write-in campaign. The problem for the leftoids is that if you take the Democrats that don't want leftoidism and you combine them with any Republicans that would want to vote in that election, potentially in the general, you can't get 51% of the votes in most areas of the United States. I wouldn't be surprised if this becomes, in at some point in the future, a problem. Write-in campaigns mounted by moderate Democrats, moderate insofar as they exist. Keep in mind, even Manchin is not particularly moderate. He's just more sane. He's less insane than Sanders or AOC or something. Write-in campaigns by corporate Dems, essentially, mounting that effort in league with, Republicans that just want to stop socialism. That could be a big problem. Essentially, this election was not just a referendum on the Democratic Party. It was also a referendum specifically on the proportion of the Democrats that have gone off into Marxist la-la land. CRT, defunding the police, throwing open the border, things like that. Beto O'Rourke's going to have a tough time in his non-career in the future. This is the truth. Socialism was already defeated in the United States for a long time. The heyday of leftoids in the United States as a political movement peaked in the 30s and the 40s, taking advantage of the leftoidism-caused Great Depression. That's really what it boils down to. That and the fact that they had FDR in there, He kept running. He was popular as a wartime president, and that's basically it. He gave people a chicken in every pot. Of course, the chickens are a lot smaller. Oh, wait, it's not even a full chicken. It's just part of a chicken breast now. But people were really hurting. This time, though, is more like the 70s. People are hurting, and they're blaming the proper source of their problems, which is the leftoids. Leftoid economic policies and blue state lockdownerism is responsible for most of what's currently happening. When you allow millions of additional migrant workers in, give them a semi-legal status, it depresses wages. When you print and print and print to pay for bullshit pork barrel spending, the currency inflates. When you lock down areas with a lot of ports and you make it difficult for people to do their jobs and then offer expanded unemployment to make sure that the labor force participation is 5 or 6 points lower than it should be, it causes problems. It causes shortages. All of the things that are, when you rant about how the police are evil and despicable racists, you're going to get more crime. The community refuses to work with them. The police at some point refuse to do their jobs. You've got police quitting right now, and EMTs and firemen and doctors and nurses and shit just because of the corona bullshit. It's clear the Democratic Party's message doesn't work. That's mostly not because of any specific part of the message, but because there is no message. When you say defund the police, but then you say reform the police. When you say we support everyone can come in all the time, hail the refugee horde, and then you say, no, actually, we do believe in border control, but, you should come in legally. What are people supposed to vote for you on? You don't have a single unified message. This is opposite the GOP. With the exception of Liz Cheney and the Bushes and a few people that in many cases have basically abandoned the party. I expect George W. to come out at any point now in the future and say, I'm a Democrat now, I've seen the light. The Iraq War, it was a great time, and the Democrats seem to have no problem with that because he said that Orange Man bad, and so he's instantly redeemed. It's like a religious sort of experience for these people. With that exception, a very small portion of the party, even the neocons play nice with the populace. They don't want to have that fight. They're willing to negotiate. And here's the difference. The leftoids don't know what negotiating is. They say, we want universal pre-K, universal community college, UBI, we want more welfare, we want a wealth tax on the billionaires, and they're not willing to negotiate. Now, there are a few, especially in the House, leftoid leaders, that are coming to the table on like the infrastructure bill. But it's not entirely clear they're even going to get that. They might end up walking away with nothing because they're not willing to walk away with anything less than their full ask. This is the opposite of how politics is meant to work in a functioning system. It's not how it works in the GOP. You've got all sorts of deal making there with McConnell as the de facto head of the legislative part of the party at the moment, which is not necessarily the greatest thing. If you happen to be a partisan Republican, you're probably not in favor of that. But they've also got a shadow leader, Donald Trump, a unifier within the Republican Party, something the Democrats do not have. Socialism has been crushed. It lost in Seattle. It lost in Buffalo. It helped lose the Virginia gubernatorial election. The Democrats are at hazard for losing New Jersey. New Jersey might end up with a Republican governor in a hyper-political climate in a blue state. New Jersey's been fairly safely blue for quite some time. The Democrats may end up losing that. Again, I can't predict that because, ballot printer go burr. It already has. It seems they came up a little bit short, and now they're scratching their heads figuring out what to do. But it's possible. The mere fact that we're talking about the fact that the Democrats might lose New Jersey is not the sort of traditionalistic state, it's not West Virginia, where you would expect that the leftoid message would fall so flat. Ultimately, this argues to two things affecting these races. Higher turnout among the anti-left and anti-democratic factions, and lowered turnout among Democrats. You're seeing on Twitter, well, I didn't vote, now I wish I had. Well, too late. Dead people can still get their votes in. They'll magically materialize Blavatsky style, but, you're in the land of the living because you got a Twitter account. I'm assuming you're not a ghost. You can use a computer. Ghosts have trouble doing that, except through telekinesis, I guess, according to spiritualism. A fucking write-in campaign beat socialism. A Republican wins re-election in Seattle against, again, the leftoid platform. Successfully casting your opponent as a leftoid, as being out of touch and believing that we should teach Marxism in schools and have no cops and stuff like that, that seems to be a winning strategy. Meanwhile, calling your opponent Trump in khakis appears to have fallen flat. Well, who could possibly be responsible for the slew of Democratic losses here in competitive races? And even, again, some that weren't considered competitive. New Jersey was not considered a 50-50 deal. Now it is, effectively. Again, they control the apparatus there, so that, again, they can print some ballots. I bet they'll figure out how to do that. But the mere fact that we're talking about it, this isn't just a Dem Party problem. It's a portion of the Dem Party that has become toxic. Leftism has already been rejected. We've been rejecting it for decades. We fought a fucking Cold War over this issue. Really, the shrieking minority of the public that actually believes in critical race theory and getting rid of the cops and not having any action on the world stage and stepping back and just bowing solemnly and becoming the next Byzantine Empire, that's a tiny minority. All they did was manage to cause more problems for the Democratic Party. Now they're reaping the ignominious rewards. Well, fuck you. Good for you. That's about all. Peace out.